Oh, you poor thing. I barely touched you.
Holy crap! That's a lot of damage! Look into my eyes when I stare at you!
The number you dialed is...
What the...
Who the hell is this guy?
Welcome, my dear nephew. It is I, Uncle Major, your favorite uncle.
No bit intended.
In this video, I'll be showing a build I came up with based on our beloved mind-melting alien, Cthulhu.
Uncle Major, actually it is pronounced.
I don't care, and I didn't ask you. So, without further ado, let's check a quick summary of this build. Starting with the traits, that is, what defines this build. It is a Strength Faith Arcane build, or a Dexterity Faith Arcane, depending on the weapon you decide to stick with. Because you cannot make the mobs in this game have a stroke, but just think of it, the best next thing will be Marais' status effect. That means this build uses Frenzied Flame Incantations. And to complement the Mind theme, it uses weapons that attacks with the power of Mind. No, it won't be using Viking War Spear, that's Sweat Lord territory. Anyway, this build we're gonna be using the Regalia of Eochaid, oh my god this name, and Marais Executioner's Greatsword, because they look awesome.
But Uncle Major, this weapon...
Shut up!
Nerd, I don't care. My builds are not about sweating or retiring gaming rig. If you wanna be a tryhard, you came to the wrong channel. Here is only for the giga chads that don't give a f about how good their DPS are, but rather just wanna have fun. Theme is the most important part, and then I try to make as strong as I can without affecting the theme. Reverend here is going to show the way out.
Lava here. Why don't you dive in? See if it burns.
Now about the pros. What I can say is the best thing about this build is the damage. It is absurdly high. That is if you manage to use the skill of the weapon on this build when the enemy is leaving an opening to do so. The incantations on the list also deals a lot of damage, especially the ones that use on range. Believe me, it is incredible. And is a fun build. This may sound a bland and a bit biased, but this was my 4th build in Elden Ring, and it was the one I had most fun so far. Now let's check the cons of this build. First, I would like to say that this build works best on New Game Plus onward. You can try on New Game, that's how I did, and it works. The problem is that it is really harsh early game because it has low damage for early weapons caused by the lack of some early attribute points. It requires a lot of patience to use the Eochaid Dancing Blade, which is the skill of both weapons of this build. Madness status effects is almost useless in PvE, but luckily most incantations that build that Madness also deals fire damage, so the incantations themselves are not useless. The armor takes a while to get, 3 pieces must be farmed in 2 different spots, and the final one can only be acquired at the end of the game. Also, the armor set of this build doesn't give a lot of poise, so that is another point where this build lacks. The Sacred Seal and some Talismans takes a while to get, some only on New Game Plus. Not a beginner noob friendly because of all those downsides of this build. It really makes a build that requires some knowledge in the game. Even if you have experience with Souls-like games, I find that this build is for players that have some knowledge in the game itself, and not just this type of game, to understand what's going on. And with the basics out of the way, let's check the weapons I select for this build. Start the one that you can get as soon as possible. My god, this weapon's name. Regalia of Eochaid. Ugh, what a terrible name. From now on I'll be calling it the ugly name. At least the weapon itself looks really nice. I decided to show the information all at once on the weapon and the items to make this video shorter. When using this weapon, the attribute point will focus on dexterity instead of strength. You only need 12 points in strength to wield it, and the rest of the build should focus on dexterity, faith and arcane. About the weapon itself, which is a really interesting one. It deals physical and magical damage. It scales better with arcane than dexterity, so keep that in mind when leveling up. What is the most interesting part of this weapon, for sure, it is the skill Eochaid Dancing Blade. It is where the most damage will come out of this weapon. The skills can be charged to increase damage and range. The way you are going to use this weapon is the following. Use its standard and heavy attacks on weak enemies, and also when tougher enemies only leave a small opening for attacks. And when these tougher enemies leave a big open, use the skill to blend their health into a nice proper death milkshake. Also a small tip, you can attack enemies behind cover with this skill. Just beware that enemies with long reach attacks can do the same when they are aggroed. The downside of this weapon skill is that it leaves you open to attacks for a long time if used incorrectly, which will happen a lot, believe me. You can get this weapon super early on as soon as you reach Lingrave by doing some parkour with Torrent. Head to this location on the map. Close to the shoreline, you can jump on a small part of the cliff. The first jump is not so obvious, but after that you just need to look for the parts that are the most flat possible. Starting with this small jump just a bit to the left, and then a really big jump to the right, avoiding this alcove on a cliff. You can jump a bit higher until you see that you can make a double jump to the left to this small flat area on a cliff with some trees and tombstones. In front of this area there is the Regalia Eochaid, the ugly name. Or you can just do the boring standard way by defeating the boss at the end of the jail cave to reach this area, which requires 2 stonework keys to open it. Okay, but what if I told you that you can do even more damage with another weapon that is almost the same as the ugly name, but slower? I present you the Marais Executioner's Greatsword. I will be shortening this weapon's name to Meg, to simplify it. It works exactly like the ugly name, but it's a great sword. The skill is the same, works the same, it should be used the same way. But if you are going to use it, which I recommend more than the straight sword, the focus on attribute points should be on strength instead of dexterity. You will only need 14 points in dex to wield the mag. But different from the ugly name, the mag scales better with strength instead of arcane. It's pretty straightforward on how to acquire. It is awarded after defeating the boss located inside the Shaded Castle, here in Altus Plateau. The problem is killing this boss is a low level character, so it's best to pick the ugly name first, use it all the way until you reach Altus Plateau and then switch for the mag. Don't forget that doing so requires to rebirth with Mom Renala. Poor Renala, she looks so pathetic. But that's because of that ridiculous banana hat she uses. Miyazaki don't give a single break for any NPC in this game. Mark my words, the NPCs on the DLC will be even more
May I have a moment of your attention?
I would like to point out that there is a way for you to help me, apart from leaving a like and subscribing. If you have a minute, I made us some polls with some questions to help me out with this video in the video descriptions below. If you watch any other of my videos and voted, there is no need to check this one because these are the same polls. Now let's check the other part of this build that deals damage, the Incantations. Starting with the obvious ones, Golden Vow and Flame Granting Strength. These are the 2 support incantations of this build. There's a third one, but we'll talk about some. Golden Vow boosts all your damage source by 15% and damage resistance of all type of damage by 10%. To get it, you need to go to the corpse tent shack in Mount Gelmer. It is on a corpse inside the shack. Beware that NPC invades you when you get close to the shack, but you can rush inside and grab it before she even spawns on the map. The other support incantation is Flame Granting Strength that combos nicely with Golden Vow. but it works even better on builds that deals fire damage because it boosts this type of damage by 20% apart from the 20% in physical damage, and also has a stamina regen boost. It is located behind Fort Gale in Eochaid. Lovely Nova's while here on my channel. You can get it early on because it only requires 15 points in faith to cast it. Just rush in, avoid the flame chariots and GTFO. Now let's see the 5 Frenzied Flame incantations for this build, starting with the Flame of the Frenzy, which is a kind of a area of effect incantation. On cast they use sprays with a really erratic pattern that fireballs from the eyes in front of them, which sounds metal AF when I put it this way, huh? Because of this, it's best used against large enemies or a really large group, especially if they are not fast movers. Be aware that all Frenzied Flame incantations also deals madness build up to the caster. That means you. Future Uncle Major here, just let you know that past Uncle Major forgot to tell you where to get this incantation. It is located inside the Cthulhu Baptismal Church in Whippy Peninsula, found on a corpse near some rats. Next is Frenzied Burst, and it is what I consider the main incantation of this build because this thing is awesome, and it is the coolest incantation in the game in my opinion, and it's pretty straightforward on how to use it when you need to hit something from afar. It is easy to get, you just need to point a gold scarab located a bit to the northwest of the Frenzied Flame village, here in Leon of the Lakes. This next incantation is so cool, but unfortunately, it is quite useless. It is the Unescapable Frenzy. Why useless? Because it only works on enemies that are like playable characters, so basically other players and a very few select NPCs. Why? It is so cool to grab someone and say like a psycho from Borderlands,
Look into my eyes when I stare at you!
falling by a laser headshot at point blank like a la Kano from Mortal Kombat. But no, you had to make a PvP trash, haven't you? Let's move on to the next incantation because I'm about to give up on this video on this alone. Next is Eochaid. You basically start mocking because your Instagram post didn't get much interaction as you want to, or whatever you do in social media. More like brain rot media if you ask me. When casted, it deals large amounts of madness build up, including the caster, but really low damage, virtually negligible damage. The buff it is that increases all damage sources by 25%. The debuff are that increases the damage you take by 30% and you are more likely to aggro the enemies. The catch is that this buff it is a body buff, which is the same for the flame granting strength. That means they don't stack. Anyhow, you have the options to choose between these two. In short, flame granting strength is more practical, while Eochaid is to be used when you are feeling cocky.
Nice cock.
In any way, to get this last one, you just need to climb the Tower of Sorrow, here in Lingrave. Yes, it is on the way to the Frenzied Burst incantation. It will be inside of a chest. And for the last we have Undurable Frenzy, which is quite similar to the Flame of Frenzy. While with the later you stand still casting it, with Undurable Frenzy you can walk towards the target while casting it, which allows for some correctional trajectory.
English, motherfucker! Do you speak it?
Trajectory. And it also can be continuously casted while you have some focus points available to do so. But this comes with a few problems. The first one being that when you stop casting it, the character will perform a final animation that will fire the incantations around the character for additional damage, but this animation cannot be cancelled, nor will consume focus points when doing so. But it will continue to build madness and locking the player in a quite vulnerable position to attack, making an incantation that requires a lot of patience, time and knowledge to know when to cast it. It is a dangerous incantation to use? Yes, and the payoff is higher damage. It is worth it? I would say it is situational, and most of the time it is not worth it. It is located in Consecrated Snowfield on a ruin called Yellow Annex. Look for these walls near the giant. You can jump over them or aggro the giant to break it. Once inside, go downstairs and the incantation will be inside a chest. Moving on to the topic of sacred seals that should be used on this build, and it's pretty straightforward which one, the Frenzied Flame seal. Simply because it boosts Frenzied Flame incantations by 20%, and to make most of it, you should get a second one on New Game Plus, because wielding two of them at the same time will increase the boost by 40%. To get this talisman is a quest on itself. I have footage ready for a guide video on Hiatus questline, but I yet to write a script and edit the video. If you're watching this way later after I upload it, the video might be ready and you can check the description of this one. Otherwise, you need to look on YouTube, search for something like a Hiatus questline or Frenzied Flame ending or something like that. If you're wondering what you should use before that, I'm glad you asked, nephew, because the answer is quite simple. Use the finger seal. It is one of the best seals to use early in game. Easy to acquire and 2 classes started with it. For this build is even better because it uses Myth Stones to upgrade, which will be the only item in it to use it. If you start with a class different than the Prophet or Confessor, you can easily buy a seal from the Twin Maidens Husks in Round Table Hold. When it comes to talismans, we need to divide them in 2 different combinations, one to use with weapons and the other to be used when focused more on incantations. For weapons, the talismans I recommend are the Winged Sword Signia / Rotten Winged Sword Signia, Millicent's Prosthesis, Warrior Jar Shard / Shard of Alexander, and Godfrey Icon. These 3 first talismans focus on increased damage on consecutive hits. First one, and the easiest to acquire, is the Winged Sword Signia. All information of these talismans will be shown on the right. If you need, pause the video to read them. As I said before, I'm trying to make this video shorter, so I'll just go over each talisman and show where they can be acquired. And this is awarded after defeating the boss at the end of Stillwater Cave in Leon of the Lakes. The next 2 are Millicent's Prosthesis and Rotted Winged Sword Signia. They are both connected to Millicent's questline, which is super uber terra mega long quest that I made a video about. You can check on the info card being shown on the top right or in the visual description. It is very important for you to watch that video if you don't know her quest. These talismans are not the only ones used on this build that are connected to her quest. In short, you must acquire the Millicent's Prosthesis, and in the next game cycle, you acquire the Rotted Winged Sword Signia. I explained why on that video. Next, we have Warrior Jar Shard and Shard of Alexander, 2 talismans that increase weapon skill damage. I haven't foreseen the need to explain his quest, so we will also need to go after a video that explains his quest, and I will be adding this quest on my to-do list. When it's ready, it will be shown in the video description. The catch here is that only one can be acquired per new game cycle. I recommend first getting the Warrior Jar Shard because it is much easier to do so and the difference boost is minimal. To get this talisman, you need to open the contents of Mr. Alexander. Head towards this location in Lingrave. When you get close to this spot, you can hear the step jar asking for help to unstuck him. Wink wink. Do that and a bit more until he cracks. That will give you the talisman. If it is not there, he may be in different places depending on what event you trigger in the world. But in short, go to where I just told you as soon as you start a new game. Now to get the Shard of Alexander will be only possible reaching the end of his quest line. When you encounter him in Crumbling Fire Azula, he will ask you to face him in combat. Show for all those girls that you are a strong, independent, full-grown man by opening a jar with no effort. After defeating him, say your goodbyes because he's about to explode. By the way, don't blame me by killing these NPCs, blame this guy. Next talisman will be Godfrey Icon. These talismans can be used in both when used with weapons or incantation. That is because it increases target spell and skill damage by 15%. To obtain, you need to kill a noodle armed bird that goes by the name of Godefroy. Nice job, Ron. Also, congratulations for the Game of the Year award. This insult of a boss is located in this corner of Altus Plateau. One sword key is required to open his jail. Now we are going to check the talismans that are to be equipped when using incantations. Starting with Fire Scorpion Charm, which is a talisman that increases fire damage by 12%. Which also gives a debuff where you take 10% more damage, which is not big of a deal, unless you use with the Howler Shrubbery. Oof. Fire Scorpion Charm is located on top of Lake Ford in Mount Gilmer. Once you reach the roof, you can hear someone whining some gibberish, look west, and jump over this broken part of the battlement to find the talisman. And the last 2 talismans are Faithful's Canvas and Flock Canvas. The first one increases your incantation damage by miserable 4%, but it can be used together with Flock Canvas because their bonuses stack. It is located inside the Celia Crystal Tunnel in Ohio. Near the end of this mine, there are 2 giant bugs doing I don't know what. We'll show them the real world magic called Bygone. No response, by the way. In front of them, there is a corpse with the Faithful's Canvas. And Flock's canvas does the same thing as the Faithful canvas, the difference being the incantation boost is 8%. This is the other talisman connected to Millicent's questline. On her questline video that I made, I explain how to obtain it, which is by Fing this dude. Just make sure to get it after acquiring Millicent's prosthesis, otherwise you will lose the possibility to acquire it on the game cycle you're in. Well, now that we saw which talismans to use, nothing more fair than check the crystal tiers to use in the Flexos Wonders physiques that complement some of them. Starting with the Flaming Shroud and Cracked tier, which increases all fire damage by 20%. It is obtainable after defeating the Putri avatar located under this minor earth tree in Ohio. Another crystal tier that I highly recommend is Thorny Cracked tier. This one is used to boost damage on consecutive hits. Stacks of the Winged Sword Insignia, the Rotten version, and Millicent's prosthesis, but it can only be acquired late in game by defeating a Putri avatar located here in the Consecrated Snowfield. You can use the Thorny Cracked tier with the Magic Shrouded Cracked tier and solely use the weapons of this build, because they also deal magical damage. And to get it, you need to defeat the Earth Tree avatar located here in Leon of the Lakes. Nephews and nephews, we finally reached the best part of this video, where we are going to check what armor you will be using, even though the ones shown in this video makes no difference, like 97.6% of the armor pieces in this game. It is, of course, Fashion Ring. First, let's talk about the white elephant in the room. Why is my Cthulhu so buffed?
Look at me, Hector.
It is because I modified his body values inside a small program that I was running. For this build, the armor pieces are quite defined. And what I mean by that is that I tried some other configurations for set, but I think this is the best one for sure. Our beloved mind-melting alien here is wearing the octopus head for helm, Outer Gravekeeper cloaker for chest armor, Zarmo bracelets for gauntlets, and Duelist greaves for leg armor. So let's check where to get these pieces of armor, starting with the one that definitely is the piece that gives the most Cthulhu vibes, the octopus head, and also because it's the one that can be acquired earlier than the rest. And to do so, head to the Saint's Bridge Site of Grace, located here in Lingrave. And from there head towards the spawn, which is very close to the first encounter location with Alexander. There will be one giant land octopus and 12 small ones, which are the ones that can drop this headpiece. Just make sure to bring some silverfoot snacks with you and your phone close by to call the emergency number when farming for this item, because the drop rate is the health hazardous number of 0.5%. I highly recommend you to increase your item discovery as much as you can. I have a video that covered this topic, which you can check in the info card on the description of this video. But in case you are going to farm this in early game, which I did, know that it took me around 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Jesus Christ.
So, good luck, nephew. Next, the chest piece and the legs are dropped from the same enemy, the Duelist. And the only place to farm for this is in Leyndell Royal Capital. From the West Capital Rampart, head southwest towards the Coliseum. On the way there will be a Duelist patrolling the area, and a second one just a bit ahead after the first one. Both Gravekeeper Cloak and Duelist Greaves have a 3% drop chance. After acquiring the former, you need to alter its appearance on a Site of Grace. And finally, Zarmo bracelets, which thankfully don't need to be farmed, are awarded after defeating the boss at the end of the Giant Conquered Hero's grave, here in the mountaintops of the Giants. I would like to point out, as always, that you can pick any starting class you like because you can set up any build with any class eventually. What a class brings is an early optimization for a build, like a loadout. I will say, for the last time, that this is a build that I recommend using on a character that is at least near the end of the game. But it works on a freshly created characters, which was what I did. If you decide to start a new game for this build, there are two possible classes optimized for this for two very different reasons. The first option is for those who want to use the Regalia of Eochaid as soon as possible. If that's the case, pick the Bandit class. But if you have more patience to level up a bit more before using, the Confessor class is a better option on the long run. It has good amount of points in dexterity and strength, one of the best starting faith levels, good amounts of mind early on, and it starts with the Finger Seal, which is the sacred seal you'll be using until you get your hands on the Frenzied Flame seal. And we have reached the most boring topic of this video, the attribute points. I don't know about you nephews, but for me this is the part of it that I like the least. So let's shake things up a little bit with a jump scare. I would like to point out that I don't keep track on where or when I apply the attribute point in certain levels, because I don't think that is a useful information to keep track on, because it's more a personal choice where you want to spend more points on. So consider the next steps more of a guide than a recipe that must be followed step by step. Let's start considering that you create a new character. What I suggest doing first is apply the points attributes that requires to use the weapons at the beginning of the build. In this case it's only the Regalia of Eochaid, which requires 12 points in strength, 18 in dexterity, and 15 in arcane. After that is more a personal choice between going for more health or more damage. I always recommend going for more health first because the damage scale of the weapon are really poor on low upgrade levels. So I'm going to point it out that 40 points in vigor is the first soft cap of this attribute. In early to mid game it is not worth going further than that. The other breakpoints of vigor are 15 and then 60. The first soft cap for Regalia of Eochaid will be 20 in dex and 20 in arcane. After that it will be 47 dex and 52 in arcane, and finally 80 for both dex and arcane. You should increase arcane first because the damage scales much better with it than dex, and it is not worth increasing strength at all for this weapon, unless you are like, level 300 or something. But of course you should not go all the way like that without considering incantations of this build. Starting with Flame granting strength that requires only 15 points in faith to be casted. Frenzy Burst is the main range attack for this build that requires only 22 faith, so reaching this requires being provided with excellent support for range attack options. And with just 3 more points you can cast Golden Vow. The highest requirements for incantation will be 33 for Hour Sharp Reading. The Frenzied Flame Seal Faith scaling soft caps are 15, 30 and 45. To know the amount of endurance you need, first pick your phone and close all those BS apps like Reddit, Instagram, Life Invader, Twitter, now called X. Oh my god, I cannot bear the name of this site anymore. Oh yeah, only a genius could came up with a name like that. Check to see the equipment load of the item you're using at the moment and divide the value by 0.7. The result is the max equip load you must have to not fat the road. For mine is more of a personal choice if you are using a lot of incantations or the weapons skill. The soft caps for mine are 35, 50 and 60, in case you wanna know. And finally, when switched to the Marais Executioner Greatsword, the minimum requirements will be 24 in strength, 14 in dex, and 23 in arcane. In the case of this weapon, strength scale is better than arcane. The soft caps for strength are 40, 51 and 80, and for arcane are 56 and 80. This is a build super heavy on attribute points. Reaching the best possible results on attributes can only be possible on New Game Plus 2 or even New Game Plus 3. But even though being super heavy on stats, it is possible to start this build from scratch. Just be ready for a harsh start. And we have reached the end of this video, dear nephews. I hope you liked this build, or at least was entertaining to watch. Remember that you can support your favorite uncle here, no pun intended, by subscribing and leaving a like. Thank you for watching and sticking to the end of this video. I hope you to see on my next one. Take care, nephews.